All right. Good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I want to be full of everyone's time, and this is an important topic. My name is Jonathan Evans, manager here in the city of Riviera Beach, and I do want to take an opportunity to allow for Councilperson Spiritus, to bring some greetings. All right. So obviously, this is an endeavor that the city of Riviera Beach has undertaken. This redistricting process is called for in our charter. And you'll hear about that this is supposed to be done every 10 years. And so we're a little late. We're about 40 years behind, but better late than never. But nonetheless, this is a very important topic, and we expect a very robust conversation. So thank you all for being here. We have procured the services of some subject matter experts that are affiliated with FAU that you'll hear a little bit today about the redistricting exercise. And one of the things that we will do, and probably the more substantive part of the presentation, is to allow for free-flowing question and answers. So make sure that you leave with your questions addressed. This item, and more importantly, this item goes before the City Council for consideration at the first meeting in June, which is June 5th. That is when the board will make a move on this item, whether they vote in favor of it, whether they don't vote in favor, but that's when the board looks to effectively take action. So just because you attend these particular public charrettes and discussions and you have a conversation with your board member, please don't leave the conversation there. Make sure that you're a participatory member in the discussion when it does go before the city council for consideration. This is an important topic. This is an important subject. And obviously this is something that all of us from every different walk of life wants to preserve the integrity of the electoral and the election process and make sure that all persons in our community have fair and equal representation. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Dr. Schultz, and he's going to introduce his team and then get into the meat and potatoes of the presentation.
Thank you, sir. I don't need that. Okay. I'm Dr. Ronald Schultz, Professor Emeritus, excuse me, at Florida Atlantic University Department of Geosciences. I've been doing redistricting. Well, actually, I've been doing districting, actually establishing original districts for many communities in Southeast Florida, starting back in the early 80s. And I've been doing it more or less continuously when the census comes out and redistricting, okay, fever takes over, so to speak. Okay. I've done over 70 formal redistricting studies, several of dozen or so of them with associates, including Mr. James Gamma Clark, who will be coming to the podium here in a moment. So districting and redistricting, okay, is a requirement. Okay, there's federal law that deals with issues revolving that. There's state law that deals with that. And of course, Riviera Beach has its own city charter, which is its constitution, so to speak, and it deals with it. Okay. And James will go through the details of that with you in a moment. Okay. I simply want to say who we are, okay, that we've done redistricting all over the place in Broward and Palm Beach counties and elsewhere, okay, and that we're very happy to be assisting, okay, the city in making some tough decisions, that's what it's going to boil down to, on how, okay, you should redistrict. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to James, and he will take you through a PowerPoint.
Good evening, everybody. How are we doing? Very good. As Dr. Schultz suggested, my name is James Gamma Clark, and I am a faculty member of the Department of Geosciences at Florida Atlantic University. We're here this evening, as Dr. Schultz suggested, to present to you the alternative districts that we've created for the consideration by the city's council. Our agenda, we will introduce the redistricting team. We've already introduced two of those members. There's one more I'll mention in just a moment. We'll talk about the city charter, specifically that portion of the city charter that pertains to redistricting. We'll go through our process as we've approached this, this particular problem. We'll talk about the data that we've used in our analysis. We'll talk about the actual analysis that we've done, and then we'll actually present the alternatives, the three alternatives that we've created. The third member of the team that isn't here because he's having a nice romantic getaway with his wife in Montreal is Michael Stam, and he's a faculty member with the Department of Urban and Regional Planning. As part of his day job, he's also the assistant city manager for the city of Pembroke Pines, and he's worked with Ron and I on a number of these projects. Okay. So the city charter obviously talks about a number of things, but it does have language that particularly deals with the redistricting issue, and it has a number of interesting points to make as it relates to redistricting. The first, of course, is what Mr. Evans suggested, is that the city is supposed to engage in redistricting every 10 years. Unfortunately, it's been more than 40 years since redistricting has taken place. In the defense of the city of Riviera Beach, we've seen this in other cities too. Those cities that have been tardy in engaging in redistricting process are usually those cities where their districts vote at large. And so for that reason, it's been determined that redistricting isn't as big an issue as it might be in other cities. Nevertheless, redistricting should have taken place. And so we were asked to come and engage in this process with you. Because it's been so long, we are going to see more change than would be typically associated with redistricting. Change, of course, one moment, please. Change, of course, is always something that is hard for people to accept. And so you might have some people with a little bit of heartburn as it deals with the change that we're going to talk about. You had your hand up. Perhaps you could hold the questions to the end. Is that okay? If you could hold that until the end, I'd appreciate it. Thank you very much. The other thing that the redistricting has to state is that all districts should be as practicably as possible equal in population. The other thing that the city's charter has to state is that the variance between, or the deviation between the districts should not vary by more than 8%. Now, this is a tougher standard than is the norm. Most governmental agencies, when they go into redistricting, have a 10% standard. So this harsher standard, this more stringent standard by the city, it's a laudable goal to make the difference between the districts even more balanced than most cities or most governmental entities would have. Good. Here we see the city's existing district boundaries. You're probably all very familiar with them. The elected officials are certainly very familiar with them. And we'll be referring back to this map again and again and again as we go through this evening's presentation. We were initially contracted to perform an analysis of your districts. And as I already alluded to, we completed that analysis and determined that your existing districts were heavily out of balance, heavily out of alignment. We presented those findings to the city in the form of a report, and we also held a workshop similar to this where we presented those findings. We then moved on to part 2 of that analysis, which actually engaged in the redistricting process, and that's what I'm here to discuss with you this evening. The data that we use in this analysis is the same data that's used all across the country at every level of government that engages in redistricting, whether we're talking about the federal level or the state level or the municipal level. Specifically, we're talking about the US Census Bureau's 2020 Census Redistricting Summary File. Specifically, we use their census blocks. The census blocks are the smallest enumeration unit that the census makes available, and you can think about these like the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. So when you're building up a large district, like a congressional district, you can use bigger jigsaw pieces. But when you're working at a smaller geographic scale, on the scale of a city, it's always necessary to use the smaller jigsaw pieces, which we call census blocks. And we take those jigsaw pieces, those census blocks, and we aggregate them together to build each of your 4 districts. The second set of data used in this analysis was housing data provided to us by the city. Specifically, the reason that we've included this is because the census is already more than 4 years old. And development has occurred in the city in the intervening 4 years since April 1st of 2020. That was Census Day. So it would be kind of ridiculous to engage in redistricting, to go through the process and expense of redistricting and ignoring the reality on the ground, that the city has grown since Census Day. The city provided us certificate that has occurred in the city since March of this year. Here we see a table that summarizes all of that development. And so you can see that we have estimated that through to March of this year, since April 1st of 2020, 2,261 people have been added to the city. The majority of those people were located in District 1. So this gives us a population estimate of 39,865. This is the estimate that we've calculated for your city through to March of this year. If we divide that value, 39,865, by 4, that gives us an average population of each district of 9,966. So, in other words, what this means is when we engage in the redistricting process, we aim to have for each district approximately 10,000 people, or just under 10,000 people for each district. That's the ideal, that's the goal. We also find that your largest district is District 1. It has 17,261 people, way more than the 10,000 average that we're talking about. Specifically, 7,295 more people than is average, or 73.2% more than the mathematical average. On the other hand, District 4 is the smallest district. It has 4,579 people. That's 5,387, or 54.1% fewer than the mathematical average. So what this means is that the city was imbalanced as of Census Day of 2020, and since then, it's only become even more imbalanced. Your mean deviation is 40.8%. And your spread, which is the difference between the largest district and the smallest district, is 127.3%. Both of those numbers far exceed that 8% threshold that we discussed previously. And it's for that reason that the city needs to engage in redistricting. So this brings us to part 2. This is the second part of our analysis. We mentioned that the city needs to redistrict, but specifically the redistricting needs to follow this following pattern. District 1 needs to significantly reduce its size, whereas Districts 2 and 4 need to grow. They need to add populations to those districts. In turn, this is going to require, with each adjustment impacting the surrounding district, every time you make a change to one boundary, that has a domino effect on the district. So we created 3 alternative maps for the council to consider, and we're going to present those to you in just a moment. But before we do that, let's talk about the methodology that we follow when we engage in redistricting. The first criterion is always population equity, reasonable population equity across the districts. Specifically, we need to get below that 8% deviation number that's called for in your charter. And critically importantly, we also have to adhere to Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which states that arbitrary dilution of minority population clusters and other discriminatory practices are strictly prohibited. Our second criterion is geographic contiguity and appropriate compactness. So we will always seek spatially compact districts. We will follow major natural and man-made boundaries where possible. We will maintain respect for communities of interest. And we will minimize the degree of change in pre-existing patterns of districts to the extent possible. Of course, after 40 years of not engaging in the redistricting process, in this case, that's a little bit more of a challenge. That said, population equity is always of primary concern, and the others are significant guiding decisions towards reasonable population balance. There's a second factor here, though, at play here, and that is new state law, specifically House Bill number 411, and it has a number of interesting points to make about redistricting. The first is that districts may not be drawn with the intent to favor or disfavor a candidate for or a member of the governing body based upon their residential address. The second is that each municipality shall create districts that are as nearly equal in proportion to their respective populations as is practicable. And thirdly, such changes may not be made in the 270 days prior to a regular general election for the governing body of the municipality. Now, because the city's next election is March 11th of 2025, this means that any new districts that are adopted must be done so before June 14th of this year. So just a couple of weeks from now. So with that said, here we have the first of the various alternatives that we prepared for the council's consideration. As we mentioned, District 4 has to expand. And there's only one way for it to do so. It can't expand north, it can't expand east, it can't expand south. It can only expand to the west. And so in this map, you see it's expanded west across the intracoastal. Similarly, we also talked about District 1 having to contract. And so you can see how its eastern border is also contracted on this map. This next map has highlighted for you those areas of change from the existing districts. So all the change that's shown under Alternative 1 are highlighted with this red hatching. Now, I should have mentioned that this is what we consider a minimalist option. Every time we engage in redistricting, we always present an option that makes the least amount of change possible to achieve population balance. And this is what Alternative 1 does, right? It's the least amount of heartburn, you could say, right? Is our goal here. So you can see the 4 specific changes on this map, and I can go through each of those changes in a little bit of detail. So here we see District 4 expanding west across the Intracoastal to President Barack Obama Highway, north of Blue Heron Boulevard. This change adds 4,140 people to District 4 from District 2, and a further 959 from District 1. The next change sees District 1 contracting west to the easterly boundary of the Sea Breeze Harbor, also known as Wedgwood Plaza, subdivision. This reduces its population by 6,241 people. This area and its residents are absorbed by District 2. Then we see District 3 contract south to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, east of the Acre Home Park, Federal Gardens, and Harmony Heights subdivisions that you see on the map there. This area and its 896 residents are also absorbed by District 2. So, overall deviation is much improved under Alternative 1. The total deviation falls to 7.1%. The mean deviation falls to 1.8%. And the spread, which I remind you is the difference between the largest and the smallest districts, falls to 5.5%. So both the mean and the spread are below that 8% threshold we discussed. Very good. Here we see the second alternative, Alternative Map 2. Alternative 2 is a deviation or a variation of Alternative 1. Again, we see a change map, and you see a little bit more red on this map. Okay, so we're increasing the change or the degree of heartburn, if you like. And specifically, we're doing that to try to achieve additional population equity. If we go through these changes in more detail, as I mentioned, we're seeking additional population equity by including a southerly expansion of District 4 along the eastern side of Broadway. Overall, this move adds 4,506 people to District 4. The other adjustments described in Alternative 1 are retained in Alternative 2. So, this alternative is the most equitable in terms of population balance. The mean deviation falls down to 0.9%, and the spread falls to 2.1%. So, statistically speaking, this is the most equitable of the 3 maps that we presented for the council's consideration. Finally, we have alternative map 3. And you can see there's a lot more change in this map. The districts take on a north-south orientation, and this alternative was created partly in response to feedback we got from the public at an event just like this one. So here we see the change map, and you can see a lot more red. And for some people, that means a lot more heartburn. Okay, let's go through these changes. District 1 retains the northwest corner of the city, west of the center line of the C-17 canal. Its eastern border then continues south of Blue Heron Boulevard along the C-17 canal as far as the Marsh Harbor subdivision. It then jogs east to Congress Avenue and then south to the city limits. District 1 becomes the city's western district under this map, absorbing 4,739 people from District 3. District 3, meanwhile, retains the areas south of Blue Heron Boulevard, west of Australian Avenue. It gains that part of the city north of Blue Heron Boulevard, east of the C-17 canal, and west of R.J. Henley Avenue. It's worth noting that this splits the Acre Home Park subdivision between Districts 2 and 3. Overall, 6,623 people are moved from District 1 to District 3 under this particular change. District 2 is composed of two parts. That part of the city north of Blue Heron Boulevard between R.J. Henley Avenue and President Barack Obama Highway. This change moves 4,333 people from District 1 to District 2. And the second part is the area south of Blue Heron Boulevard between Australian Avenue and Broadway. Here, 2,506 people are moved from District 3 to District 2. The adjustments to District 4, described under Alternative 2, are retained under this particular map. So, statistically speaking, here's how these numbers work out for Alternative 3. The overall deviation is again much improved. The mean deviation falls to 2%, and the spread falls to 6.2%. Both numbers again below that 8% threshold. So to summarize, Alternative 1 makes the minimal geographic adjustments necessary to the existing boundaries to achieve reasonable population equity. Alternative 2 is the most balanced, and Alternative 3 draws the district boundaries in a primarily north-south direction. Just as a quick recap, here we see Alternative Map 1, here's Alternative Map 2, and finally here we see Alternative Map 3. And with that, we'd be very happy to answer any questions that you may have. That's fine. That's what we're here for.
All right. What we're going to do is I'm going to work this side of the room and then go over there. Certainly, let's keep the questions to questions, and then we'll provide an opportunity just for some commentary. But we want to make sure we maximize the opportunity for folks to go ahead and ask questions, and then we'll move through the rows. So we'll start with this first row here. Questions?
Yeah, how would you redraw the map if you adjusted the Singer Island population to what it really is instead of what the census is? Because it's a unique area in terms of there are many taxpayers that reside part of the year in Singer Island, but they're counted by the census when they go north.
Snowbirds.
Snowbirds.
Okay.
And it is a large number of those. I mean, your number showing a couple thousand people living in Singer Island is way off. And,
I
it's
think
more
it was
like
4,500.
4,000. It's more like 10,000 or more.
Okay.
I mean, we can give you an accurate population count,
Mhm.
and I'd be interested to see how you would redraw an alternative with the correct data. I mean, you showed us the data that you used to make these, and it obviously is way off in terms of population, not census, but population. And I think the city charter says population. It doesn't say use the census data.
The population that we use is the standard for the United States, no matter where you are in the United States. It's what Congress uses or what the state legislature uses to draw the boundaries for the House of Representatives. It's what the state legislature uses to draw the boundaries for the state senate, for the state house. And it's the data set that is used by counties and municipalities, cities, and there's other units of government that also have districts. This is the data set that is used. It is the legal definition of population in the United States. If you're lucky enough to have more than one home, you have to choose one as your usual place of residence, and that's where you're counted. So if you have a place in, Wisconsin, and you have a place in Florida, you choose whether your usual place of residence is Wisconsin, or if it's Florida, Riviera Beach in this case. That's an individual decision. The census does not tell you how to make that decision. It says, choose your usual place of residence. And the head of the household fills out the census form and puts down where his particular residence is. The census is the legal, using other data sources, which I understand you can go to the property appraiser. Okay, the property appraiser doesn't count people. It counts housing units, taxable units. Okay, you have to convert property appraiser data into persons by using some kind of persons per housing unit factor. Those numbers typically come from the census. Okay, they're derived, from the census doing, it's once every 10 years, we have a census of population. But perhaps you know this, there's our censuses other than the census of population. The Bureau of the Census does census of housing on a different year than the census of population. It does a census of agriculture. It does a census of industries. There's census of transportation. If you get on the webpage and look, you'll see there's a lot of different censuses, all on a 10-year cycle, but on different years, because obviously they can't do all that in 1 year. Okay. So the data that is used to convert housing units to population comes primarily from the census. Okay. And it is not really the right data set for doing redistricting. Redistricting has to be defensible. If a unit of government made decisions not using census of population, they're opening themselves up. They're being vulnerable for challenge. Okay, depending on whatever citizens or whatever group wanted to challenge that. So if you don't use the standard data that's used everywhere, I've told you I've done over 70 redistrictings when I started. The census data updated, as you get further from the census year, 2004, 2005, 2024, 2025, 2027, whatever, then the estimates that you have to bring to bear rely on census, persons per housing unit, but they also rely on hard counts of the additional housing that's been added since the census did its tabulation. And that's typically done through COs. COs are updated on a weekly basis. Property appraiser is another source of data, but it's only released to the public once a year. So if you're working in the middle of the year, it's going to be six months old data, but it can be used. But it doesn't count people. It counts housing units. And then you have to make the decision how to upgrade that. And our approach, our agreement with the city, states that we are going to use the standard data set, the census of housing, the census of population.
Okay. Wait, guys. So there's about 34 people in the room. So if you can please raise your hand, you can ask a question. I did say there's going to be an opportunity for comments, but please, I want the questions to be answered because that's the substantive part. Then, philosophically, we can debate the other elements, but let's ask the questions. So the subject matter experts, because we had a hard stop at 8, and then we also have questions online. Yes, the answer's okay. I can understand, but please don't interrupt when I'm trying to conduct the meeting. So we're going to ask a question and then I'm going to move on, and I'm actually going to hold the microphone. So if you can state your name for the record, because we are taking taking names of persons that are participating. State your name for the record, ask your questions. We'll be clear and concise. And then if we have some time available, we'll offer it up for additional comments from persons. So.
Let me give you my name. I don't think you know it. George Williamson. I'm the president of the Palm Beach Isles POA.
Thank you. All right.
Hi, Adrian Benzoni. My question, I actually have two. There are 5 current districts in the city, and we're addressing only 4. Are we entertaining a reduction from 5 to 4, or is something staying the same? And then does population equal voters? Is that an equivalent comparison?
Okay, so I'll answer the question with regards to District 5 is at large. So District 5 is for the entire city. One thing that I need to make sure that there's an understanding or a distinction as it relates to the districts. The districts are to ensure that there's fair and equitable representation throughout the cities. All the elected officials run at large. So even if this redistricting exercise goes through, you still would vote for all 6 persons that sit up there. This is just to ensure that you don't have 6 elected officials that live in the same neighborhood or live in the same condo. So there is not a contemplation of additional districts or expansion of districts. It is from the perspective to right size the districts, because one of the things that was communicated is that in one district you have 17,000 persons. So if I live in District 1 and I want to run for office, it's 1 out of 17,000 versus a situation in other districts where it's 1 out of 5,000. So this allows for more opportunities for folks to run for office and for those particular elected officials that have interactions with their district. But district is primarily for residency. Okay, I think this gentleman here at the end of the row had a question. And please state your name for the record.
My name is Steve Roach, and I want to ask you 2 things about what you just said. The charter doesn't say that this is about residency, and it also doesn't say it's about voters. It's about population. Okay, so I just want to say that. My question to you is, it was very easy for you to pull the COs of the new buildings and estimate how many people were involved there. But at the same time, for the current residents, I'm speaking specifically of Singer Island, you go against census data. Do you not agree with me that this is a unique area?
No, it's not a unique area.
It's not unique in the
No,
fact-
this is a common phenomenon. I can tell a personal story. I live on a barrier island. Okay, I have 2 homes. I have one on a barrier island. Okay, I was just there the other day, okay, over the holiday. When you go out at night and you stand in my complex, more than one building, and you look around, there's not very many lights this time of the year. Okay, I'm using, vernacular terms, snowbird. Okay, they're gone. They're not, okay, a legal resident in the sense of counting for population purposes in
That's
doing
not the
census.
purpose.
They-
That's not the definition of what this is.
The word population,
I believe that-
Okay, we're asking, sir, please, we're asking questions. Like I said, there will be opportunities for public comment where you can share what your perspective is, but let's get to the questions. Sir.
2 comments. The first one, you keep referring to the census and Washington and the Senate and the House. So, and you use the census to get your data. Do you have to use that? Is it law? You're making out like you have to use that.
the standard data used is the US Census. Now, there are special cases, particularly during intercensal years. That is, the census is taken on April 1 of a year that ends in 0. So it's only done every 10 years. 2020 is the most recent one. If you were doing redistricting in 2028, okay, you would, and if the particular community is a rapidly growing community, you would want to update the 8-year-old census data by doing some additional work. You can do, a city can entertain its own census. But that's very costly, very time consuming, okay? And then whenever you count people, okay, there's a lot of energy, a lot of dollars go into doing that, okay? The census is done every 10 years. When that data is current, it's the most appropriate data set, the least expensive data set, okay, and the most defensible data set you can use. Of course, cities can choose to do other things, okay, and then they'll deal with the results of that. Okay.
So there was a couple of points that were raised. There's a discussion of using housing units and multiplying that by some average number, whatever average number you want to use. We mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that we have to abide by the Voting Rights Act and that we cannot arbitrarily dilute minority population clusters. That means that whatever population base you have that you choose to use has to have some accounting of race and ethnicity. If you only use units and multiply by some factor, you're not going to get any type of racial information or ethnic information. So if you try to redistrict on that information, you are almost bound to violate the Voting Rights Act, which is why our base is always the census data. Now, you asking about voters, I don't think that question was answered. So let me just circle back to that. The redistricting efforts are not based on voters. They're based on the people that live in the city. And so what that means is that a child that was born this morning deserves as much representation as someone who's 100 years old or who's 50 years old. It's not based upon voters, it's about the people who live here.
Just for the record, my name is Stephen Selby. I live at 5000 North on Singer Island. My second comment is regarding the numbers you stated for Singer Island. It's not real numbers. You can't plan it on that. I want to give you an example. There's currently 3,694 units of condos. I'm not talking about areas or private houses. You're using 2.5 per unit. That's your number. That is 9,235 just in the condos along the island. And there's 3 additional condos to be built over the next couple of years. So how can your numbers of 4,000 relate to any of those 3 renderings?
Okay, that our number, okay, is the number of people when the census was taken who claimed Riviera Beach condos, okay, as their usual place of residence, and that's where they were counted. The other units that you're talking in excess of that, okay, are people who are obviously here part of the year, okay, but they don't claim Riviera Beach, okay, as their usual place of residence. They have somewhere else, okay, that they claim as their usual place of residence. Therefore, they're not considered to be part of the resident population for redistricting, for city government purposes. There's many uses of census data in your city. Funds come to this city because of the head count. Okay, there are all kinds of issues. Whether or not they pay taxes is not relevant. Whether or not they are a citizen, it's not relevant, gentlemen. I pay taxes. I have several homes. I pay taxes both places. I'm only counted one place. Okay. It doesn't matter whether they vote. They don't have to be registered to vote to claim. They don't have to be a citizen of the United States. They have to be a resident. Somebody who claims that place as their usual place of residence. And just to be kind of a little extravagant here, if you're homeless, you're counted where you are on April 1st. If you're an RVer who's given up your home and you're traveling for 2 years, okay, running about the country, you're counted where you are on April 1st. That's how the census works. And that's the official numbers when you look at the state, the federal government, or any legal unit in the United States. Residents are counted by the census. And that's what we're using here because it's the most defensible. I'm trying to make that point clear. Of course, you. Pardon?
Can we, guys, please. We have a whole nother side of the room we want to get to as it relates to questions. And so if we can be mindful of our other residents in this room so they can ask their questions, I would greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Brandy Davis Balsamo. I've actually been to 3 of these meetings, so I'd really like to get my questions answered. I live in Lakeview Park, which is the neighborhood just south of Blue Heron on the waterfront. It is the last residential zoned area. Everything below it is commercial. So in map 1, what I don't understand is how that's not arbitrary dilution, because we're right now one solid waterfront on the west side. You're leaving us as a hanging widow there with the commercial in map 1. So no, the commercial doesn't vote, and our concerns don't map to the rest of the concerns in District 2 in the middle of the mainland there. So we're not statistically significant, right? That little neighborhood, some of the subdivisions there are only like 1 street. So why are we the only difference between alternative 1 and alternative 2?
Sorry, you said Lakeview Park, is that
Yes.
correct? Yeah. So when you look at alternative 1 and alternative 2, as you correctly point out, the only difference between the 2 maps is that southerly expansion, right? Arbitrary, when you use the word arbitrary dilution, or the phrase arbitrary dilution, what you're really talking about is gerrymandering, right? Redistricting has a shoddy reputation, a bad reputation, rightly so, because usually not at the city level, but at state level, federal level, right? Politicians get involved in the redistricting process and they start drawing boundaries so that they can pick their voters rather than the voters picking their elected representatives, right? And so you end up with these districts that have these very funky little boundaries, trying to carve out, the demographics that they think will vote for them, or maybe packing all the people that they think won't vote for them into a single district, right? So they call this packing and cracking. So arbitrary dilution of a population cluster would suggest that we had drawn this boundary specifically to gerrymander that district, right? To disadvantage a specific socio-demographic group, okay? What we showed you is that in alternative 2, the population equity improves, right? The mean deviation value, the spread between the districts gets better. So in terms of population equity, alternative 2 is our best option. And we've achieved that by adding this southern expansion. So we've improved the redistricting issue. And so it's certainly not arbitrary dilution. We've achieved a notable goal. Now you can argue, why does it make sense to go all the way down to the southern district? Sure, you could lop off the port if you wanted to. But these districts are compact, they're recognizable. It's very easy to say, oh, well, District 4 goes east as far as Broadway and south to the city limits. That's a easily definable boundary. So again, not arbitrary.
But for map 1,
Yeah.
to put it bluntly, if you look at District 2 now, the demographics are such that you have a large portion of waterfront and a large portion of that minority group, which I'm included in. And once you change that portion is going to be very, very small. So that is my concern, is we're going to be so small to the District 2 representative, and it's not about representatives, but to the District 2 representative who has to take care of all of the people in that blue area. Our neighborhood concerns aren't going to matter because the commercial is the commercial, right? They don't vote. But we're just that little section of about 200 homes, and we're not statistically significant. So what I don't understand is why our neighborhood would kind of be just lobbed off there, because we have homes between 400,000 and 4 million. Obviously, our concerns are very different.
I'm sorry, so your argument is that you want to be in the new District 2 or you want to be in District 4?
I think we should be kept consistent with the community of interest. So the waterfront area, the area to the north, there should be one solid waterfront, or if you have to cut it, since there's no residential on the waterfront south of Blue Heron, at least include us in 4 so our community of interest is not bifurcated.
Well, under alternative 2, you are in District 4.
I know, but since there's an alternative 1, that could get voted, and I'm not the one choosing. So that's
Again,
why I'm expressing
so
these
I mean,
concerns.
obviously, I appreciate your concern, right? But there's no alternative that's going to make everybody happy, right? You can't please all the people all the time. We've explained our rationale for how we came up with these districts. Alternative 1 was what we call our minimalist option, the one that made the least amount of change that we possibly could to achieve population equity. And you can see that, you know, I understand your concerns, but the boundaries are very logical. It's Blue Heron. That's the border between District 4 and District 2. As far as President Barack Obama Highway, that's another very major, notable thoroughfare. Very logical, very defendable. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yep.
So one thing, and I'll go to you, Ms. Brown. One thing I think I just want to make clear as well is that the districts, we don't have single member districts. All elected officials can be communicated about a variety of different issues from all. A council person on Singer Island can listen to a person in District 1 and resolve their particular issues. It really is to ensure, like I said, that there is representation throughout the city. You vote for all the elected officials, so they should all hear all your concerns. And so I just want to make sure that persons don't feel, now it is a courtesy that they do reach out to the district representative, because that's the person that lives in your community. So if you have a pothole issue and all that, they probably 9 times out of 10 have seen that particular issue and will work with staff to resolve that. But I just want to make sure that it's not a situation where it's a single member district as the school board or the county or those larger unit of government, where in fact that is the person that carries the torch for you. All our elected officials be willing to take all your complaints or all your concerns and all your praise and resolve and address those particular issues. So I did want to make sure that that's clear. Ms. Bram? I'm going to go this way. So after you, then I'll.
Good evening, Mayor Bram. And I live on the west side. And when I sit here and I hear this pandering, if you want accountability, you seek it in the representatives that are representing your district. Ms. Bram and others, we said that we were going to sue. I did state that. I've circulated it out. This is nothing to impact just one individual. And when I sit here and when I sit here and then I hear this, because see, you are not the only ones that have homes here up north somewhere too. Miss Bram and relatives do too. But I claim my homestead here. And this is where I vote at. This is where I vote at. I don't care how many condominiums that you may build over there. Every 10 years, it is a census count. And every data is used. This is not your doing. This is entirely the government. And I sit here and I hear this here because some people have disregard even about the government, as long as everything is pleasing them. I do not care if it is a resident from over on this side coming over there, because the bottom line of it is we should work together. I welcome that. I welcome anyone, because Miss Bram is not a racist person. So I'm saying this here because see, you for years, I have history here of where you wanted to separate from the island. Go ahead on and try it. You need the pipelines. You need everything that's connected across that bridge there. So it's time to see how can we come together and have some meeting of the minds to build this city up here. No matter who represents Miss Bram, I'm going to hold you accountable. So with all the people that wants a single member district, encourage your representative to vote for a single member district that put it on as a referendum and get that accountability. But it's still not going to change the census, because the census has to be done, whether we like it or not. Miss Bram say that she's not all this or all that, but I'm going to work. I'm going to work because I want this city built up. And we don't care who it is. And we need to stop this here. We need to stop it. In 9 or 10 years, whatever condominiums are being built over there, They'll be counted in too if they claim they homestead here. If their domicile is in Connecticut, where mine and my relatives are, well, okay, they're up there. Miss Brown is here. So because I want to participate in my government here to make sure that things are moving. So I know that you all have been getting a lot of flack, and it is just deplorable because it shows the separation of power that you're constantly trying to exist. We don't want that. We don't care whether you're white, blue, or black over on this side represent us. And I sit here and hear this here about your neighborhood. Well, I took pictures of all of these neighborhoods. So yours not no better than Miss Graham and hers and nobody else's. We need to improve on all of these neighborhoods and have these elected officials to represent. That's good government there. But you have been allowing them to skirt it, sit back and skirt it. This is why your roads and stuff, but the city managers and whatever board that we have, your infrastructure here is bad in this city. So try to separate us. So you would do everything in your power to pander and throw all these riches in here. And all it's doing is representing racism here. We need to stop this here. We need to stop it.
All right.
My initial, Keith Golden, City of Riviera Beach resident. My initial question was asked and answered when Mr. Evans talked about right sizing the districts. But I do have a question. Just can you provide an example of a region that is successfully redistricted after periods, a long period like we have, and what were some of the outcomes?
Yeah. So in this last cycle alone, since 2020, I believe this is the 11th city that we've worked on. We've had 2 cities here in Palm Beach County who had also gone a very long time without redistricting. One of those cases, they just switched to single member districts. And so that really was the impetus for redistricting. And the other one just, I don't know, they just realized it was time. And so we were able to go in and successfully create new districts for them. In one case, they had very excellent population equity. The meetings were not well attended. So we really appreciate you all coming out here and all your passion. We really do appreciate that. In another case, it was a little bit more of a contentious issue, but we all got there eventually. I hope we'll all get there eventually here in this case too.
Right. We present 3 alternatives, okay, so that the city council has some options to consider. That's what we were hired to do, and that's what we do as a standard. We don't just present option 1. We present, in this case, 3 options, and we listen to input. And in fact, the third option that you saw here was one that came about because we were at a forum. Okay, before we did the work, we were at a forum. It's got to be a month and a half or so ago. Okay, and we went back and we worked and we looked at that issues that were being raised, and we came up with alternative 3. Okay, and alternative 1, as James has pointed out, is our least disruptive in terms of shifting borders. But as Mr. Evans has pointed out, it's well over 40 years. Why the city didn't redistrict over those 40 years is not for me to say, okay? But it's time. And your charter, your government says you must have districts that are no more than 8% out of balance. And what we have done in all 3 alternatives is to provide options that meet those requirements, and they meet the state laws that are involved, and they meet the federal laws that are involved.
I got to get this one back here before I get to you. Sorry.
Hey, how you doing? My name is Robert Cool. I live at 3800 North Ocean. Is there a difference between how you allocate resources between commercial and residential neighborhoods, in the sense that Singer Island, and like the lady that was sitting beside me on the west side, is substantially commercial? I mean, it's both. But
We look at, we look at population. We don't, the commercial, obviously, in some parts of the city, there's a fair amount of commercial and there's a little bit of population. If that area is being added to one of the, districts, then it'll come in as a whole. We try to follow major boundaries. We don't try to go through the inner little streets that go in between neighborhoods or in between commercial, developments. We try to use main streets so everybody knows without having to get a map, in their pocket, where the boundaries are. Blue Heron Boulevard, President Barack Obama, highway, whatever the main road is, we attempt to use those to the extent that we can, remembering population equality across the districts is the primary motivating force. But you're allowed a little bit of leeway. In the case of Riviera Beach, we're allowed 8%. It's your charter.
Yeah, I suspect that it's best for all of the districts and all of the communities if you optimize to some degree with respect to the environment and people's residents and all that. You optimize the commerciality of where we are. And the more revenue we have in Riviera Beach, the more tax base. The more tax base we have, the more we can do infrastructure projects for everybody, for all the districts, right? So my question is it a random formula or do you have a particular formula on how monies get allocated to individual communities? I mean, on the west side of the bridge, there's a whole development commercially, which is great because it's good for jobs, it's good for better schools, better water systems. We're looking at the water project. Singer Island happens to be in a very nice area, a very nice beach, and generates substantial income. I'm not just talking about residents, but substantial income, which is taxable and goes to the city.
Yeah.
So how do you manage that?
So those tax dollars are going to be there no matter how we draw the districts, right? They're going to be in your city boundaries. So it's really not a factor for this particular project, right? That's for your city government to take care of it. So it's a whole separate question.
Right, but my point is that there must be some sort of incentive to invest and create more condos, more workplaces, make a better environment for everyone. And if some areas are preferential for whatever reason, geographics, by the ocean, or whatever, then
Sir, if I don't mean to cut you off, but in the interest of time, I agree with you 100%. You're absolutely right, but it's just not a factor for redistricting.
Yeah. So what was said is more specific to government operations. That's something that as we prioritize projects and as we get ready to get into the budget process, when we have discussions with the elected officials, they help us create the capital improvements plan, which is the 5-year budget plan that effectively allocates resources within the community for the perspective of infrastructure. And I can tell you in our community, we have roughly just roadway infrastructure. We have about $100 million worth of roadway infrastructure that we have to invariably address. And then all the other facilities that we're currently in the process. But that's something that is done at the local level with your existing elected officials. This particular process, they did not ask us for our budget numbers, our staff allocation, our budget, or what have you. They asked for information concerning the population and to ensure that there is, the adequate data to be able to put forth these maps of consideration. So related on another scale, but not for the purposes of this particular exercise. And I'll share a little bit more with you after. Yeah.
I'm sensing some trust issues here.
No, you know how this is why she took the mic so fast. I didn't even like 20 seconds in her speech. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's got the microphone. So she was quick. She just grabbed it. So that's why I'm holding it again. Go ahead. You can speak. It still works if I hold it.
You cannot move from there. I'm going to call Chief Gordon.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I just have a few questions. First of all, you spoke about staff helping you come up with these numbers. Can you just tell me what staff in particular?
All of our dealings with the city went through a single contact member, and that was
Which
Mr.
is?
Evans. That doesn't mean Mr.
Mm.
Evans computed that data. It means that he was the thoroughfare for that data.
Um, when you talk about the parameters you speak of that you are to follow, right?
Mhm.
These are in page, I'm sorry, because we were not allowed to ask questions because Mr. Evans changed it at the last minute as we went along.
Right here
Um,
on the board.
No, the parameters that you speak of, the concern.
Oh, Anna Vernay. You want me to spell it?
The concern that the lady has was specifically that you're diluting her population, right? The lady Brandy, you're diluting her population, and let me tell you how you're doing that. If you bring up your maps again, and this is my personal opinion, they are skewed. Let me tell you how. Okay, look, it's my opinion, guys. I'm allowed to have it. Okay, let me show you how. Bring up map one.
This is map
Can I
one.
walk up? Can I walk up, please?
Yeah, but we want to get through the questions. So
This question, sorry, I have to show you. If you look at map one, there's the only thing and these three maps that are the same is this area here.
Correct.
Go to the next one.
Yes, certainly. You want alternative 2. There we go.
Goes across here.
Yep,
And the third one does the same thing.
it does, yes.
Why can it go down and across? Because,
Well,
well,
again,
well,
let me
let him-
finish. I'm allowed to pause to collect my thoughts. As we explained, District 4 has to expand, okay? And we expand contiguously. We don't go snaking off down right-of-ways trying to grab, non-contiguous neighborhoods, right? It's logical for it to expand to its neighboring borders. In the case of District 4, being in its present case a largely Barrier Island district, or in fact exclusively Barrier Island district, it only has the option of coming across the intracoastal. And so the immediate neighborhood is right this area that's consistent with all the maps. And also it's this area where we find the approximately 5,500 people that you need to achieve the statistically average population. No. No, please let me explain. Okay. Let me.
Anna, please just let's ask the questions, but let's not pass assertions. These gentlemen are well qualified, have done this in multiple other agencies. Let's ask the questions. It's okay to disagree. It is okay. It's completely okay to have your own philosophical opinion and perspective with regards to how the maps should lay out. Certainly, there is difference of opinion, but let's ask the questions. So then the next form of the process is, okay, I don't like map 1, map 2, or map 3. Well, then I'm going to communicate to my elected officials. I have issues with X, Y, and Z, and let the policymakers make the policy. But let's not create a situation where we're accusing folks that have no dog in the fight, but to make sure that it is legally defensible. Because at the end of the day, when this is challenged, those two gentlemen are the one that's going to be in the courtroom, not me. So,
Please let me answer your first question. So you mentioned the arbitrary dilution of a minority population, right? Arbitrary. It doesn't say that you cannot dilute a population. It's impossible to carve up a city without upsetting one person or another, unfortunately. But arbitrary dilution means, again, that you're engaging in malicious practices, that you're engaging in malicious gerrymandering. I am quite comfortable sitting up here and saying to you, we do not engage in gerrymandering. We do not engage in malicious map making. We do not arbitrarily dilute specifically protected minority populations. That's the population that's protected by the Voting Rights Act. Protected minority populations.
last question, Anna.
No.
Yes, last question.
I'm sorry, but my population is minority population, and so my question to you goes again. Why is it that in none of these maps, you take that going south and going south through Broadway and then going west.
'Cause
That
that-
should have been an option that you, why not?
That would be gerrymandering. That would be gerrymandering. If you draw such a convoluted boundary that you have to run down through the port to gain population to the west, that would be, in our opinion, gerrymandering, and that is not a map that we would be comfortable with.
It wouldn't be as compact as what you're seeing. These are compact districts to the extent possible, given the population geography, okay, in Riviera Beach. And they're very recognizable. You have to talk to Mr. Evans. He's in charge, not me.
Rochelle Hughes. I just want to point out one thing. So I know you did the census in 2020, and I want everyone to remember April 1st, 2020, we just began COVID. Okay. After that, yes, we had people who moved down here. And I'm going to give an example. I live on the very west side of Riviera Beach, the very west side. I'm at the end. So we have 355 homes in my community alone. Probably prior to COVID, we averaged maybe 2 people per household. Okay. That's 710 people. Since COVID and families having to move in together and all that stuff, we have homes that have 4 people. We have homes that have 6 people. So if we took 4 people in all those homes, that brings it up to 1420. You take 6 people, which we do. There's probably 8 people in like my neighbor's house, and I'm only 2. So we'll average it out to 6 people per household. That brings it up to 2,130 people just in Lone Pine alone, which I'm sure wasn't technically counted because of when the census was done. Now remember, we are full, Singer Island, even my community, we have what we call VRBOs, Airbnbs, and timeshares. So on Singer Island, people come down for timeshares, maybe 2-3 months out of the year, or a week or 2, whatever. They can't be counted in the census because they don't live here as a resident. They may come here and use our facilities 2, 3, 4 months out of the year, but they do not count as a population on this map. Just like in my neighborhood, we have people, they did their homes as Airbnbs and VRBOs. Do you know how many people go through there? We can't count each and every one of those. So I actually understand where you're coming from on the census on that. And I just want everyone to know that it's just not Singer Island where you see a lot of people during the winter. We see it too, because I also have the vacation village across the street from me, which is the Rapids Water Park. But there are some people who live in Vacation Village year round. And we have people who come there and visit several months out of the year. So now on my question regarding, so I like map, I'm going to say I like map 3 because I'm the one that said I would love a north-south because I'm west of 95. Since I've lived here for 22 years, I've never had a person on west of 95 who represented our district at council. So being to say, oh, 1 out of 10,000 people that would actually live west of 95 sounds great. My question is, I know in some instances you split up some neighborhoods, and I wasn't sure if you were just, trying to because that's just how it worked. And I didn't know if you looked at other alternatives of where maybe Acre Home Park could be in one district, but, lower something else. I think, I don't know what neighborhoods they were, but there was Acre Home Park that got split, and I think one in the south that got split. So I didn't know if there was a way to take Acre Home Park, put it in one, because I know people had concerns. And then below, you take all the other ones and put them in the other district. I guess looking at Singer Island, yes, going across, but
across from the Marina Village, you do have homes over there that are closer to the water as well. But it seems like you were doing way more on the top Witchton Point with her. So I didn't know if you looked at splitting that in half of those, like maybe within a certain footage from Broadway all the way down to be part of District 4 because they are closer to the water.
Okay, thank you very much. There's a lot there. So let me try to and go through that one at a time. You're absolutely right. You know, the pandemic was a major event in everybody's lives, and it may well have had an impact on population density in the city since the pandemic. And what I would say to that is, hopefully the city doesn't wait for another 40 years to engage in redistricting, and that after the upcoming decennial census
One, guys.
in 2030, you know, you engage in the redistricting again. And so that's only 5.5 years from now. So hopefully, you know, when that data comes out in 5.5 years, 6 years, those different characteristics of the housing counts will be reflected on that, and the maps will get updated again, and this will become a living document rather than this birthing process that we're going through, right? This very painful process. To go back to your other point about splitting neighborhoods, we try not to split neighborhoods. The cases where we typically have split neighborhoods is where a neighborhood is found on either side of a major thoroughfare. Okay, so we've tried to make our district major thoroughfares, and yeah, that sometimes will result in the splitting of a neighborhood. It's safe to say that in arriving at these 3 maps, we went through a lot of different machinations, right? The 3 maps that you see are our final 3 best, right? But there were a lot of dominoes that we were moving around trying to improve the maps. So the suggestion that you're making, maybe you go a little bit further east of Broadway, is that what you were saying? Oh, excuse me, yes, west of Broadway, okay. Sure. Right. Okay.
But instead maybe cutting it in half, but I understand what you're talking about in regards to maybe
Sure. So you could certainly go in there and try to carve up the minor roads, right? But then the boundaries become less recognizable. You have to, as Ron suggested, you have to bust out a map to figure out, oh, which district am I in? And it's not necessarily the case that the population equity is going to be any better. In fact, it's more than likely going to be worse.
Yeah, population equity is the number one. That's what'll get you into court if you don't do it. Okay.
Okay, well, since everyone else has ignored the directive of don't give your comments until later, ask questions, I'm going to give a comment before my question also, because I don't want to be the only one who obeyed the rules. My comment is JB Dixon. I'm JB Dixon from Singer Island. I agree with my neighbors that I understand about the population being used. I think it is unfair to our representative because I know that those people who own on Singer Island and do not have their domicile here still call the representative for everything, and they expect service, they expect answers. And so the burden on the District 4 representative is huge because of that additional population, and a population who knows that they pay huge taxes and they expect their issues to be addressed, and they expect their representative to do that. So I know that in other districts it has not been common for some of the district representatives to even answer phone calls from their constituents in their district. But that is another way in which Singer Island has always been different, at least in the years that I have been here. What my question is very similar, I think, to what the last speaker said. When you look at having common interests, living on the water, caring about the environmental impacts of what happens to that water are very, very strong unifying issues. And my question is, again, why not go north to all of the places on Singer Island, outside Singer Island, beginning with Marina Grande and going up all of those neighborhoods to the northern border of Riviera Beach, because those issues are the same as our issues, because they're on the water. And a survey, which hasn't yet been released, of Singer Island residents had an incredible return. And I can tell you that the top issues, because we asked them what their issues were, the top 3 issues were water related. So I think that that would be a very good thing to take a look at. North of Blue Heron, not just south.
Thank you. I think we are north of Blue Heron, right? The District 4 is everything north of Blue Heron, east of President Barack Obama Highway, and all of Singer Island, at least the city portion of Singer Island. Yeah. Yeah, so that dark blue that you see there, all the way out over to President Barack Obama Highway, that's District 4.
And the reason that it's gone this way is right to grab the population numbers needed to get to close to around 10,000, because there's not enough population if you were just to hug the coastline.
I can tell you, if there had
Or
been
not
enough
coastline, the intercoastal.
population to only hug the coastline, that certainly would have been an alternative we would have brought for consideration, because that would have made logical sense. But there isn't enough population there, according to the census. So we have to go yet further west.
Right. Also, it's not just Singer Island that has people who don't declare, okay, it as their home. It occurs elsewhere in the city as well. Okay. Singer Island has a large number of that, but it also occurs elsewhere in the city. So it's not just one place. Okay. That, if I can use the word snowbirds or visitors or whatever phrase is most appropriate here, it's all over the city.
All right. Walt, we're going to go to comments. We're going to ask if there's any online questions from our viewing audience on YouTube and Facebook. And then we'll work from this side all the way back for comments. And you're going to have 1 minute for comments. And I'm still going to hold the microphone with 2 hands. All right. No, you can ask your question in your comments. So if you want to ask a question in your comments, you certainly do. But I just want to provide everyone the same opportunity. So any comments in the front row here? Any comments? No comments? All right. Moving on. Second row. Question?
Tanya Davis Johnson, Riviera Beach. Is the city confident that in its haste to meet this deadline that they have evaluated every possible scenario to achieve equity?
So I'm going to take part of this question and then I'll turn it over to these gentlemen. I have talked to other municipal managers and a multitude of them that have done redistricting, and the same names continued to come up. And so these gentlemen have done this and are the subject matter experts, locally here, especially in Palm Beach and Broward and Dade County. So they came very highly recommended, and they've done all the analysis. And one thing that I can tell you that has been refreshing in the process is when they provide the data and the information, that's the data and the information. There's not a situation where there's a correspondence. Hey, can you move this? Or hey, can you do that? Hey, thank you for the report. We'll go ahead and post the agenda. And they were very intentional about their efforts. So I would say that unequivocally, yes, we got the right people for the job. And I feel comfortable that if we are in fact challenged, that they have the bandwidth with their team to be able to defend the position that the city's put forward. All right. All right. Next row. Nothing in this row? Let me get you. All right. We'll go here and then we'll.
I was just going to ask a question. I was just going to ask. I'm going to fight you.
I know.
was just going to ask.
Don't make me pull this room over.
But now I have a comment as well. I cannot tell you the number of people who have called, written, texted about this topic, and many people asked me to come here this evening to
make comments and to ask questions. So I don't necessarily tonight represent just myself. The first question I have is, yes or no? Is there any possible way the city would consider, or the experts, the consultants would consider, using any other number besides the census to tell the number of people who live on Singer Island? Any number, such as the number of households, the number of voters, any other number? Or is that absolutely the final word? We're using the census and that's it? That's my first question.
The census is the overriding data source. As I mentioned to you, you can.
You got 30 seconds left in your comments.
My question is the number overriding?
There is no other data.
Okay, that's it. Then.
Okay.
That's all I want.
That stands up to the census,
Thank you.
especially on any legal
Thank
challenges.
you. That was my second question.
Yeah.
What legal challenges are you prepared to face if Singer Island residents say that they don't feel that they're represented adequately?
So we are not going to talk legal strategy or even surmise that there's going to be a legal challenge. However, the city will defend itself appropriately, and obviously we'll have to have conversations with council. But I can tell you the exercise was, I asked the question, and gentlemen, if you can answer that publicly, out of all the exercises that you have done in your redistricting experience, have you ever gotten to second and final reading where the item has not been passed?
No. Okay. I've had other scenarios I can talk about that didn't involve second. Okay. I've done over 70 of these. I have all kinds of stories, but I prefer sitting at a bar with a beer. Okay. I mean, I could go on for a long time here. Okay.
Start back here. Comments?
I'm not going to grab the mic, so I apologize. 1 minute. We have a council representative that filed a suit because this was not being done. It was not being done because it was for the same very reason here. And when it impacts everyone, it shouldn't be a one-sided thing. But a lawsuit was filed for the same very reason here. And most of all, it was filed to take the council out of it, to take staff. You said you have to have a go-between person, but you didn't have a whole lot of people for the same very reason, to take everybody out of it so that it could be equitable, balanced, and fair, whether we like it or not. Do Ms. Bram see that everything that she wants and needs? No. But I'm willing to work, and everybody else willing to work to get our community and city where it needs to be at. And I do thank you all, and I do wish that you all move forward.
All right, Ms. Bram, time.
Yeah.
You weren't paying attention when I came back to your line. I purposely asked, but.
So I agree with the lady's comments in the front, what you were saying earlier. I realize this is a numbers game, and I think having an older census with all of the changes that have been talked about here doesn't make sense to determine how the districts are set up. But at the bottom line, I think it's a resource allocation. I realize this is a numbers game, nothing to do with it. But if one has an expanded district with not double the people or triple the people in it, then it dilutes the representation. One has that perception. And the lady in the front row was talking about it, whether we're 4,000 or 8,000 on Singer Island, peak season, we could be 30,000. And the needs are very, very different, such as needing a fire department and a police station, and having certain infrastructure, which one would have for a population 12 months a year. That's not your job, I get it, but I wanted to bring it up because I think that's the concern. And it's not east or west in my mind, it's just proper representation, and then it comes down to dollars and cents and proper infrastructure, higher tax revenues, and it allows for everything better in the community at large, which would be my objective if I were running the city council.
Thank you.
My comment is, thank you so very much for your time. And I would like to say that he who has the gold rule, and I want our hearts to rule. Thank you.
Councilperson?
I'll let you hold the mic. Okay, just so that everyone knows, I'm not speaking on purpose because I will be voting, but I do have some comments to make. As you know, if you were at the last council meeting where this first reading was held, many of my comments and statements mirrored every comment, pretty much every comment and statement that was made here tonight. I've received numerous phone calls and emails and texts and everything you can think of with reference to this issue. I want everyone to understand that it's not the consultants or the city manager that make this decision. It's going to be made by the city council on June 5th. So please come to the city meeting on June 5th. But keep that in mind that it's not the consultants, they're making a recommendation, and the city manager, they make a recommendation. The final decision is made by the city council. And you will hear additional comments from me on June 5th. Many of you heard my comments last time. You'll hear the comments, the same comments again, and additional comments with reference to that. I just don't want to make those comments here tonight, but I do agree with the majority of the people that spoke here tonight. Thank you.
Anyone else in this row? You were counted over there, so I can't count you. You moved.
You can't be counted twice.
So, in listening to everyone here in the room, there is another option, right? Some cities went to self-districting, right? Meaning Singer Island would vote for Singer Island, right? So what's District 4? I'm sorry, Dr. Rattel. So District 4 would vote for District 4, District 1 would vote for District 1. So there is that option.
You're talking about closed districts.
I'm talking about
single member districts elected by the district.
what I'm talking about is that there is another option which was not presented, I think should have been presented.
So if I can answer that question, if you went to that option, the boundaries would look exactly the same because the same rules would be in place. Right?
You have to deal with resident population, usual place of residence. Okay, that's what the census counts. That's what is the standard in this US of A. No matter where you are, you only get to be counted once. No matter if you're the Kennedys and you have compounds all over the place, you're only counted one place.
I just want to respond to that. And I really wanted to do it at the next meeting, but there are many states where people can vote in municipal elections in two different areas. If they're a part-time resident in one district and they're a homesteaded person in another district, they're permitted to vote in the municipal elections in both districts. So that's not true throughout the whole country. So please, let's get the facts straight. Thank you.
Well, let me try to clarify that. You said they are allowed to vote, okay, in two different districts because of state law. Voting is a state issue. You probably are very right about that. I don't know those states, but that you are probably very right. Still, they're only a resident in terms of the official population of the United States in one place. Okay? They may vote multiple places if a state allows them, but they're still only a resident of one place from the standpoint of the US Census. Okay. I understand your point.
So you don't.
The question I have is it's a comment and a question. It's my understanding that there are 5 council members, 1 at large in the 4 districts. And it's also my understanding that for the 4 council members that are not at large, they have to reside in however you draw these maps, they'll have to reside there. The way the map is today, before and they were for 40 years, the person that represented Singer Island lived on Singer Island and was very sensitive to the needs of that unique geographic requirements and needs of that area. When with the new maps of whatever alternative you have, a big majority of the population when you use the census data is no longer Singer Island. And I wonder, will the representative with the new, maps, have any option of ever coming from Singer Island? They'll be on the west side of the bridge, more than likely, based on the numbers that you put out. I mean, just the way elections work. And that's why I think we're concerned about using the census data, not the population of Singer Island, because of the representative.
It's
and how they're
election
gonna-
at large. Every citizen,
No, I
every
understand.
citizen who registers to vote gets to vote for all 5 commissioners plus the mayor. So it's not just the votes from Singer Island that's doing anything. It's the votes from the city as
But
a
the
whole.
representative today resides in Singer Island, is really focused on the needs of Singer Island. And that's what's going to no longer happen. And that's why I'm sitting here. That's why I'm
Well,
concerned.
Singer Island is still a part of District 4. It's a very big part of it. Okay? No matter which option they choose. Okay?
My comment is, it's nothing to do with the race that's brought up. It is simply Singer Island has such different needs than the mainland. The mainland, let's just say, well, Glenn's going to be in charge now of the high school. Do you know how many kids go to high school from Singer Island? That will be in our district, a new high school. It doesn't make sense. The needs of the people on the mainland are so different than the needs of the people on Singer Island. Everything from policing to services provided by the city. Singer Island pays a large percent of the taxes and asks for very little in return, and we've been fine with that. I think our biggest thing is somebody in Monroe Heights could be our representative and really doesn't have any needs or understanding of what goes on. Singer Island is a resort island. Don't blame me. Don't blame anybody here. That's what helps this city thrive. Simply said.
School boards, okay, in my opinion, I've worked for school boards many times. School boards are in charge of the high schools, not the council member of, okay. They may have influence, but they're not in charge. And school boards have their own districts.
David Brady, Singer Island.
All right, I'm going to go one more time around. These are 30 seconds. All right, 30 seconds, and I'm holding the microphone. But really quickly, before we get into the questions, we've got a couple of comments online that persons wanted to be able to find out, basically why is the city doing this and when the last time the city did this. So some of the stuff that we mentioned earlier, but also if you go to our city website, go to the city clerk's page, click on the redistricting tab, you can get access to all the presentations. If you have some time, there's a 40-page report that gets into greater detail concerning the redistricting exercise. And I would encourage you to read over that because it really does lay things out in a layperson's perspective as to all the nuances associated with this. And then it shows the PowerPoint presentation. And then we're also airing this live on YouTube and social media. And so you'll be able to access this again. And then if you wanted to go back to our meeting that we had on the 23rd, you could effectively do that. So there's a lot of information. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns on our website, you can put your comments in there. That information comes right to my admin. My admin then forwards it on over to our redistricting team, and then they can look at the information. So there's a lot of ways to get a hold of us, but realistically, Councilperson Spirit has hit the nail on the head that this is going to come before the board at June 5th. If you have a perspective and you want to share with your elected body, June 5th is the venue to effectively do it because the board has to act one way or another, whether it's for it or against it or another alternative that may come up. But this is going to come from a public policy perspective at the June 5th meeting. So I'm going to go one more time around, 30 seconds, and then we'll have closing remarks and conclude the meeting.
Jonathan, this question is for you. I heard about redistricting maybe a month ago for the first time. Obviously, you've been working on it a long time, but as a citizen, I didn't know about it. There was a meeting last week Glenn referred to, which was the first time perhaps at the general meeting that they spoke about it. And the decision's going to be next week. That seems so fast. Like what's the background that we have to hustle? I know the election's March 25th, and so it backs up to next week. I get that. But we haven't done this in 40 years, and now we got a week to do it. So how come we're at this place where we're going crazy?
Uh, Anything is an option when it comes to the elected officials. Any and all options are on the table. And so I do want to provide for a little bit of context. The city, this is something that invariably, and now I certainly understand why no city manager has done this in 40 years. Clearly, when they say put the notes in the desks that didn't happen. But this is something that invariably we wanted to be able to, that we wanted to clear off as it relates to a project and an assignment that we needed to do. This is something that we did receive, legal action against the city to invariably proceed forward with the redistricting process. So we then facilitated moving forward with the redistricting process to be able to cure that particular issue. But I did bring this to the attention of the board in 2020, and there was some trepidations as it relates to this particular process. And so the action that was taken, it did facilitate, okay, we've got to move through this. So this is actually the fourth public meeting that we've had as a result of this. We had one that was back in April, where we had about 50 people attend, and then we had we had our city council meeting, then the one on the 23rd, and this. So ultimately, this comes back before the board for legislative action, and the board's going to have to take a decision. Now, if the board says that we are going to table this, or we're not going to vote on it, invariably it's something that has to get done. So if it's, it's not successful this time, I've got to bring it back in some iteration, somehow, some way again. The challenge that you have is that if redistricting does not proceed forward and the vote is, we table it or what have you, you have now told folks that there is inequities in the system, and there's inequities in the system, but you're not looking to effectively address that. And then you fall foul to not just the charter requirements, which is our constitution, but also state and federal law. So it becomes a situation where we don't want Riviera Beach to be a case study at the state legislature and said, this is why you need to preempt local governments, because we asked them to do something and they haven't in fact done that. So if it doesn't move forward, we have to have a plan that it effectively does move forward and something that we can collectively agree on. Now, if it's not adopted June 5th, that means that it will not impact the election in 2025. That means it will impact the elections that will come in 26, or actually 27, because I think it's skipped. But you'll actually have a situation where that will take, in effect. And some cities have effectively done that. One of the other things that I want to make sure it's abundantly clear is you've just had an election for District 4. If the district changes, that you don't have to redo the election. Their councilperson Spiritus will remain in that seat in that district until the election for that seat, which is 3 years down the road. So all your elected officials, even your District 2 representative that was also reelected, will remain in that particular seat until that seat is up for reelection, and then the new district will take effect. So you would not lose your representation. Now, could there be a situation with the new seats where two elected officials that currently reside on the board sit and could run against each other for a seat? That's quite possible. But I can tell you one of the things that was very refreshing about this entire process, the elected officials were not involved in the process. They never asked for any information. We never provided any information. I don't even know where some of our elected officials live. So these maps were done based on facts and information without any bias or any to make sure that we comply with what the intent of the law calls for.
How long have you guys been working on this? I mean, I only know that in a month. It's been longer than that.
It goes back quite a ways.
Yeah. I probably started
Last summer.
Yeah. Correspondence back and forth with, and then I took the project. Yeah.
To clarify, we haven't been in the data since last summer.
Yeah.
The city first reached out to us last summer. We began conversations and starting to working to the contract.
Yeah. Oh, and name.
To the council? Will you be making a recommendation of which one of
We
these?
need names.
maps?
Oh, Lee Innocenti, Singer Island.
Maury Alexander.
The question was, will I be making any recommendations? So the city council voted to move forward with all three maps. So the city council is going to get all three maps, and they're going to have the conversation about what the maps.
All three maps are viable. We don't have a recommendation to the city council on which one they should choose.
Yeah. We did. Yeah, let me get here and then I'll. Oh, you didn't hear? Name louder. Name.
Maury Alexander.
Maury Alexander.
Tanya Davis Johnson again. You mentioned that these were the best three maps. What were the others? And were and were they brought up for discussion and consideration?
There was
for
never
any
another
that's
map
not-
made. We simply moved neighborhoods, census blocks, as James was trying to explain. Census blocks are these very little areas that you see right there. Okay, you can hardly see the lines on them. Those were the building blocks. And we moved those around, okay, trying to make compact districts always cognizant of what the population balance would be.
Are there visuals of those areas?
No, there's no other maps. Okay.
They're all extremely temporary in nature, as in they existed for mere minutes. And we said, okay, that doesn't work as well. Let's move on to the next experiment. That doesn't work as well. Let's move on to the next experiment. And so these were the three logical boundaries.
How do we get all the backup data to all of this?
It's all available online.
All of the little blocks?
Oh, yeah, you can grab that off of the census data and this all.
The census data is publicly available from their website.
Anybody can look it up.
So you don't have the numbers per neighborhood or per block that you just mentioned?
We have a database
Oh,
of
you
census
do?
data. We have the census database. It's available online for anybody to download.
So, but
We have the data
should
for
be
every
able to
city
get it
block.
right from
Okay,
them.
every census block.
because they work for you, right?
Okay.
Yes, if you want the data, we can get you the data, or
You're
you can
talking
download
about
the data.
thousands upon thousands of lines of information.
We paid for it, so we shouldn't be
It will,
entitled to it.
all of the data, all of our analysis becomes property of the city once we've completed our task.
Any other comments in this row? This row. Any other comments in this row? All right. Ms. Ram.
I'm not gonna get the mic. You made mention about, we know that the commercial and industrial, some of us, we do live on the west side. Those are not calculated into the census. So I believe that, am I correct? That's why the maps and stuff, District 2, District 3 and stuff, it incorporated the population of the people. Am I right or wrong?
It's the population that drives the numbers, okay, not the industrial areas. However, they are obviously included when we draw lines.
And my other question was, it was a gentleman here and he left and he was corresponding with me. He was concerned about his taxes is not doing what he would like for his tax, how his taxes work. And I did tell him, because I'm going to say this, because some of the representatives over here, we have capital, monies and stuff. Your representative is the one to fight for your roads or your infrastructure, whatever those communities and stuff need. They are the ones to do that.
That's absolutely correct.
We, with this censor here, and I want to say that I thank you all, because basically too, we had said this here 20 years ago. We've tried to get the other council representatives to realize this is solely, is not about you. They so apt about trying to keep their district, but it's a matter of the population. When you talk about Singer Island, we on the west side too. We have a lot of new growth as well in there. We have Berkeley. We have all of those affordable homes and things that are coming and are transpiring on the west side. So I just want to say kudos to you all. And I know your job is different.
Oh, I'm sorry. You saw I was going for it. All right. I'm just getting clarity. So the least amount of movement to get where we want is alternative one. So
Correct.
Correct. All right. So my next question is, can we have 6 districts?
That's a city charter issue. And
Can we do
Mr.
that,
Evans
like,
is
later
best,
on?
he's best able to discuss that issue.
Okay, that's the question I have in mind. It's like, if we agree on 1 or 3, and then you say in 2 years, and we come back, can we rewrite it then to have 6 districts? That's the question.
So that would be an amendment to the charter, and the charter is basically the agreement between the city and the residents. And so you can amend the charter to effectively do that, but that goes out to a vote, and then you all make a determination. And there's 2 ways to get items onto the charter, to go through the charter review board, or to go to the city council, or a citizen driven petition. So yeah, there's ways to effectively do that. Well, and here's what, a lot of the stuff that we're seeing throughout the community, that District 2 is probably going to see the largest population growth in the city over the next couple of years. And then you're going to see some additional growth in the tail where the City Hall campus is currently. So there's going to be a situation, invariably, the population is going to grow, and you're going to be moving district lines, 10 years from now, or what have you, because of the growth that the city would experience. But the process is going to be a little bit different when we go through the redistricting, 10 years from now, or when the census data comes up, and looking at to make sure that there's no, variation that, this moves forward that causes us to be in violation of our charter. So.
And 1 is the least extreme, and 3 is the one that the community came up with.
No, three is an option that came out as one of the discussions, but also gave you an orientation that moved east or west to east to west, or what have you. So that's just another alternative, but that's the greater variation from the existing plan. So.
Mary Butler.
Hello, Mary.
Hello, Mary.
I just want to make it clear that the city manager alluded to this, but I want to make it clear that the city council under the charter can change or modify any of these maps. They don't have to accept the map as presented to them. They could also table it to another time. So I just want to make that clear. And also, please contact all your council members and let them know your thoughts on this. It would be helpful, I'm sure, for them. And please remember to show up on June 5th. Put that on your calendar.
So just real quick on a closing note, again, most of us didn't know anything about this until 3 weeks ago. I watch religiously on YouTube your meetings. Very painful.
All of them, all the way through the end?
No, that's the nice thing of YouTube. I can get through it, but I paid attention to this. I watched this for an hour and a half, 2 hours, ever how long it went on. And it seems to me this got pushed through trying to not let the residents know about it, and you let everybody go home to bring this out. So everybody that's lived here that pays taxes is up north now. Something smells.
Sure. So I do want to, any closing remarks, guys, before we go ahead?
I think we made our case.
All right. Any questions online? No? Okay. Yes. Well, yes. If this does move forward, the next redistricting will be 10 years from now. However, one of the things that I would make sure is that when the census is done again, we take a look at the data and to see if the numbers, if there's any deviation or variation from the respective district, because we still have the language that talks about the variation not being greater than 8%. So that's something that in most cases it will be in the next 10 years. But we are going to look at it when our next census comes out in 2030. So again, thank you everybody for being here this evening. Obviously, very charged discussion, a lot of emotion behind it because it is something that's it's important. It's an important topic and it's an important discussion, and it's a discussion that I think should have obviously happened, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and fortunately, I have the blessed opportunity to be the one that has to have to deal with this. But nonetheless, it's something that we have to get done. What that variation looks like, whatever that map looks like, whatever that panacea is, that we invariably have to get there. And we have to make sure that it is fair and equitable and accurate, and it's legally defensible, and we don't fall victim to anything that was mentioned by our speakers. And so there's a lot of time, energy, and work that has moved through this particular process. And so I do want to encourage people to go to our website, look at the data, read the information for yourself. But I can tell you that this is a process that I had a lot of conversations with a lot of municipal managers, and it is something that every community tries to wrap their arms around and try to understand this. And so there wasn't a nefarious plot to move the districts or those types of things. We don't operate like that. I don't operate like that. And obviously our consultants come well respected and a lot of great credentials and work at academic institutions where this is within their wheelhouse and their skill set. And so I'm glad that we have them on board and they're here with us to help us move us through the process. So thank you for spending the time with us. Again, Councilperson Spears has hit the nail on the head with, if you're here watching this, and obviously he's in the room, and then we also have one of our other council members, legislative aide here, and I know our other council members are also watching, please reach out to them, communicate to them. If you think it's great, fabulous. If you don't, fabulous. Just make sure that you inform them as to how you're thinking and looking at these particular things, because it's a tough decision that they have to look down the road and say they've got to make this decision as to what they think is in the best interest of our community. And so it's not a decision that they're going to take lightly, and they're most likely going to lose some sleep over it. But nonetheless, please reach out to them and ensure that they know how you feel on this particular issue so they can make the right decision for our community moving forward. So thank you all for being here, and thank you for spending the time with us, and have a good night.